All right, let's do this. If you got your Bibles, turn into Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. Oh my goodness. I'm horrible right now. I'm going to read from here. We're cool. Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. I went too raw. Too raw. Luke chapter 8. Man, so we've talked about some cool subjects over the weeks. I'm not going to recap like I did last week, but I hope they've been a blessing to you. You know, all in marriage, we did on the second week. We talked about why I'm all in and building a foundation. And last week we talked about all in generosity. And we talked about a heart of a giver. And if you were new here last week and you came back today, thank you so much for not running away after I talked about money last week. So it's always a itchy topic, but it has to be preached about, and God did some cool things with it. But today, I was praying this week, and I was like, man, God, what do you want me to say? Because I want to give a word that will really set us into a new season. I want something that's going to, this is an all-in, you know? Like, I'm going all in type thing. Like, I'm pushing the chips all into the table. I'm going all in. So if I'm doing that, man, I want to finish this series strong, where you leave here today, you're like, and I'm all in for the Lord. And I'm all into what he's doing. And I believe that this story in Luke chapter 8 paints the perfect picture of what I want to say today. Pull it up. Luke chapter 8. Man, Luke chapter 8. It says this. We got to clear all, and then we got to bring it. There we go. Now, this is one of my favorite stories, by the way. This is an awesome story, and you'll know it if you know the Bible pretty well or anything. You'll know the story once I start reading it. It says, now when Jesus had returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. Next verse. He implored him to come to his house, for he had his only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. Man, as Jesus went, the people pressed around him. She was dying. Jairus fallen at the feet of Jesus, asking him for a miracle. You ever felt desperate for a miracle before? You ever needed God to really do something for you in your life? And it says, and then as Jesus went on, the people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. Next verse. And she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood had ceased. She had been healed. And Jesus said, who was it that touched me? I always thought that was funny, because it's like Jesus is like my Superman or something. He's walking around, somebody touching him. He feels power going on. He's like, who touched me? You know, I just thought that was crazy because people were pressing around. It says, and then it says, and Jesus said, who was it that touched me? And when all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you, and they're all pressing into you. Of course somebody touched you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling. And falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. Man. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, man, your daughter is dead. Do not even bother the teacher anymore. But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and the mother of the child. And this is getting good. And all were weeping and mourning for her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but she is sleeping. Come, somebody say amen. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. Man, they're laughing at Jesus of what he's proclaiming in faith. Come on, let me see the next. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given to her to eat. What an awesome story in the Bible. If you're taking notes, which I hope that you are, you can title this message, A Faith That's All In. A faith that's all in. Look at your neighbor and say, I have a faith. Come on, look at your neighbor and say, I have a faith that's all in. Look at your other neighbor and say, watch me go. All in. All in. A faith that's all in. That's our title today. You know, when I was praying, that's what I felt like the Lord was leading. He's like, what does all in faith look like? You know, because today, faith, it seems like has become a pretty loose term. It's like we just throw faith out there like it's anything, really. We throw faith out there like it's some political affiliation or some ethnicity. It's like somebody asks you, you're like, I'm white, I'm black, I'm faith, or I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, I'm faith. I'm this faith-filled person. I have faith. And really what it boils down to is like, we'll talk about how we have faith, but the extent of what we say is basically that we just believe in Jesus. When we think about what faith is, we will say that, really it's the belief of Jesus. And I feel like that's not a full term of what faith is. Of course, faith is believing in Jesus, but I believe that faith is so much more than just believing in Jesus. I don't believe that faith is just some term that we use to say we believe in Jesus. I believe faith is a lifestyle. It's the way I live my life. It's the way I walk in my faith. It's the way I talk in my faith. It's the way I act in my faith. And I believe that as I looked into this, I sort of wanted to look at what a biblical view of faith is. Because if we're talking about, people can say they have faith all the time in things, right? I've even heard pastors, and even myself early on preaching, when I was preaching to youth and stuff, I would take a chair sometimes, right? You ever seen that demonstration? I'd put a chair down and be like, you know what faith is? Faith is that I know this chair is going to hold me up when I sit down on it. I have the faith that this chair is going to, that's why I sit down. That's a faith. And the more I think about the biblical term of faith, the more I think that that's really not the case. I don't know if you're getting this yet, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail. Hebrews 11, chapter 1 gives us a biblical definition of what faith is, right? It says this. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, the evidence of things not seen. So faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not seen. So when I think about faith and what faith is, I think about how it's about going into the unknown. It's about obeying God when you don't even know what the outcome is. It's about walking in faith when you even can't see, because remember, we walk by faith, not by what? Sight. So I'm walking in faith. But see, that's why I said the chairs, I don't feel like it's a good demonstration, because guess what? I can see the chair. I can see it. Of course, it's easy to trust something that I can see, but can I trust something that I can't see? Man, that's where I think we use faith so loosely, because we'll say, yeah, I have the faith to do this because I see it happening. But do you have the faith when it's not happening? Like the walls of Jericho, right? Have you ever heard that story when Joshua, when they're walking around the walls, they were told the walls were going to fall, and they kept walking. And every time they kept walking around it, there was nothing happening that was falling. Faith is to say, I'm going to keep on walking, and I'm not going to stop until I see something happen. There's this term about a full kind of faith. And I started thinking about how, this faith, if it's about not seeing something, then what it could be. Actually, I want to play a game with you real quick. Can we play a game? I like playing games. It's going to be fun. So the opposite, what is the opposite of good? Bad, evil, right? What is the opposite of darkness? All right. What is the opposite of faith? I hear doubt. What else? Unbelief. Doubt, unbelief. Can I suggest to you a third option of what I believe the opposite of faith is? I believe that the opposite of faith is certainty. Let that sink in real quick. I believe that the opposite of faith is certainty. You see, if I pulled the chair up and I said I had the faith to sit down in, I'm certain that thing's going to hold me up. I'm certain that it's going to happen, okay? And if we were certain all the time about things, we wouldn't need God, right? If I was always certain about what's going to be the outcome, then I wouldn't need God. But if I wasn't certain, could I still sit down? And so I see how faith, it even makes me wonder that, you know what? I believe that you can have doubt and still have faith. You can still have fear and still have faith. You think you when you have faith, you're going to eliminate all the other emotions that's going to happen in your life? No, it's not going to happen sometimes, because You're going to have doubt sometimes. I mean, even in the Bible, you can read about some of the guys who had faith, but they still doubt it. I think that's why God told Joshua, 10 times in the first chapter about how he needed to be strong and be courageous, right? He needed to be strong and needed to be courageous, because if he wasn't, I think he was telling him that because maybe Joshua was doubting his calling and stuff like that, but he still had faith in God. So the opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's certainty. It's certainty, because if it was certainty, then I wouldn't have no need for God. And I want to jump into this story, because as I break this story down, I believe that it's going to teach us something about what all-in faith looks like. I think it's really cool how it shows us, man, because pull up Hebrews 11, chapter 1 again. Because in this passage, it says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Look at your neighbor and say, for. For. The conviction of things not seen, the evidence of things not seen. What is faith for, though? That's the question. So, Siri was trying to answer me. What is faith for? You know, I think that's the question that I really want to dive into. And I got 4 points for you today of what all-in faith looks like. And what it looks like through the story that we have right here in front of us as we dig into this story. Point number 1 for you is this. All-in faith has an objective. All-in faith has an objective. All right, check this out. In this story that we were just reading, in the first 4 verses or so, we see objectives, right? We see Jesus in this story walking around to heal. That was his objective, all right? We see the people pressing around Jesus that are following the crowd, expecting to see God heal. That's their objective. They're with Jesus to watch somebody be healed. Jairus is on his knees begging God to heal his daughter. So his objective of faith was desperate to see a healing. And then you have this lady, this sick lady with this disease, who has the objective to be healed. I mean, we have all these objectives that are happening. And I start looking at it. And I was like, you know, that right there, those 4 objectives, those are pure objectives to faith. You know, I should have faith in desperate times where I need God. I should have faith in expectant times where I'm pressing around God and watching what he's doing. I should have faith if things are happening and I need healing or I need someone to be healed. I should have faith in all those. But did you know that there's a way to have false objective to faith? I mean, there's a ton of passages in the Bible where we see different, healings take place. And so I started studying a few different ones because I wanted to look at this objective. I thought this was interesting to me, that time somebody was acting in faith, it was an objective, right? And so I looked at this story in Mark chapter 3. Pull this up. We're gonna look at this. I'm a parallel. It's only a few verses, but I see some objectives. I want you to be watching as I read some of the characters and try to see what their objectives are. See what's happening here, because I believe that we can have a false objective to our faith sometimes, and you're going to catch this you're going to have an aha moment when I start showing you this. It says, Jesus entered the synagogue, and a man there was with a withered hand, and they watched Jesus. The Pharisees and the Sadducees is they, all right? And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath so they might accuse him. Next verse. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come here. And he said to him, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm or to save a life or to kill? But they were silent. Next verse. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him on how to destroy Jesus. Okay, there's our story right there. First 6 verses. What are the objectives that are happening, right? You have Jesus who's going there to heal. You have the guy with the withered hand to possibly be there to heal. But then you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees who are there to do what? Judge. They're there to judge. They're just trying to find a way to accuse Jesus. And I started thinking about that objective and how these people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, knew the Bible like the back of their hand, guys. Like they knew this stuff. They followed the law to the T. And they had faith. But why were they using their faith to judge? what I started looking at and I started wondering about, because all in faith always has an objective, but is it a pure objective or is it a false objective? Because I saw this. Why is he judging? It's like the question, I'll never understand why people come to church just to critique things. I don't get it. I really don't. Like, you'll walk into church and you'll get in here and you'll be leaving talking to your spouse like, I really didn't like that song they played today. I couldn't even worship. Like, man, like it just wasn't moving to me at all. Or you're like, that pastor, bro, he's got some good words, but today he was just off. Like he didn't have much going for him. Or did you see how so-and-so was dressed today? Like, oh my goodness, like, man, they need to fix that. Or did you see this? Or did you see that? And you start talking to people and whispering in their ears about that kind of stuff. And you're here to critique. And so you're using your faith to judge what God is doing. You're using your faith, instead of joining what God is doing, you start judging what God is doing. And all in faith doesn't judge what God's doing. All in faith jumps and joins what God is doing. You see, just like the objective of those crowd that's following Jesus, man, they're following Jesus closely because they are expectant of what God is going to do. They ain't worrying about judging. They just want to see God do something. They just want to join in on what God is doing. And that's what kind of all-in faith that I want to have. I don't want to have the kind of faith where I'm here trying to worry about what should happen or how things should go. I just want to meet with Jesus. I just want to be empowered in my faith. I just want God to set me free from things that I need to be set free from. I just need God to take some of my brokenness and put it all back together. Sometimes I just need help. But if we come to church to critique, then we're just using our faith to judge. I mean, when I was studying this message, man, I was looking at I was watching this conversation between an atheist and between a Christian, right? And it was hilarious because this atheist had so much knowledge on what to say. The atheist, she's like, you know what? I know the Bible. I know the Bible. And the message that I hear in the Bible is one of love. It's one of love. It's one of caring. It's one of, being, of love. And just talking about that. And she said, but it just wonders me that if that's what the Bible's about and that's what Christianity is about, then why, when I get on Facebook and I say that I'm an atheist, do I get comments from Christians saying, you're going to meet your maker one day, or you're going to rot in hell one day? She's like, if it's a message of love, then why am I getting judged so hard? And I had this aha moment, like, man, us Christians sometimes can be the worst about judging people. We can get on Facebook and start arguing with somebody's interpretation of Scripture. We can get like so judgmental about how somebody's living their life. Man, and Jesus, man, he confronted systems and stuff like that. But even when he went to that woman on the well who was having all these different things going on in her life with different husbands and all that kind of stuff, and she had this going, did he judge her for what she was doing? Or did he offer grace to her? And if I want to follow Jesus' example of faith, then I want to have a faith that's not objective. I'm not going to complain. I mean, what is your faith of your objective when it comes to actually, I'll say it like this. Sometimes we use faith in such a way that only directly benefits us. And our objective is like, God, can you do this for me? Can you please get my kids under control? Can you please help me do this? Can you help me get this promotion, God? Can you help me do this? Can I ask you a question? When's the last time that you asked God to do something that might be a little uncomfortable in your life? When's the last time you prayed that God would do something that would stretch you a little bit? Because if you always stay comfortable and need God to benefit you, you might never grow in your walk with Christ, because sometimes you need to be stretched to grow a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And so this objective thing, man, it's what's been on my heart about this objective. What is my objective? Can I ask you today, what is your faith objective? Is it to judge what God's doing? Or is it to join on what God is doing? To jump in what God is doing? Because I don't know about you, but I want to have the all-in kind of faith that joins what God's doing with people that want to see God move. And that's what I see as faith objective. And then you got Peter. Peter is so funny in the Bible to me because he's this guy that's so raw. It's like he has his moments where he's so dumb, And then he has his moments where he is just awesome, right? It's just like us. Because I have my moments where I'm just so dumb. And then I have my moments where I feel like I'm doing great things. You ever felt like that? So that's why I love Peter so much, because he's just so raw. And we get to see one of his dumb moments right here, to be completely honest, when it comes to faith. You know, pull up verse 45 for me, Tori. Peter, so moving on to our next point, Peter says this. It says that the lady came up behind and touched the fringe of his garment, and she was healed. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And then Peter says this. This is Peter's response. "Master, the crowds are surrounding you and they're pressing into you." He's like, actually, let's paint this picture, okay? Peter's on a schedule. He's trying to get from point A to point B. Because why? There's a girl that's dying. And we got to get to her as fast as we can. So he's like pulling Jesus. Like, come on, this crowd's trying to hold you back. We got to get there. This girl's dying, and faith needs you now, right now. And Jesus over here walking feels this tug on his garment. And he turns around. It's like, "Who touched me?" Peter's like, "Are you stupid, man? Like, come on. You got people all around you. I need you to come on. Like, this girl is dying over here. Come on with me. Pull me. Get me there. And get me over there." And she's pulling Peter. And he's like, "Hold on. What's the next verse say?" He goes to the next verse. And he says, but Jesus said, "But no, someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And then he turns around, knowing that he needs to get to point B to heal this young girl. He turns around to make time for the person that touched him. Point number 2 for you is that all in faith doesn't have an occasion. All in faith doesn't have an occasion. You see, Peter had a faith schedule. How many of us have a faith schedule? Like, I'm going to use my faith on Sundays, because that's when I go to church. Oh, and equip classes are starting, so I'm going to sign up and I'm going to use my faith on Wednesdays. 6:30, Money Matters. Be there. It's going to be good. I'm going to use my faith on these days, because when I have time, I'm going to use my faith. When I'm rushing time, I got to get there to use my faith. How many of you rush for church to get here in the mornings? Don't act like you don't, because I know last week it was 10:03 and I saw about 25 people rolling up and trying to get into church before the countdown ended, right? Trying to get over here, get this, and make this happen. It's like we have an occasion for faith. And Jesus, he's using this moment, I believe, to teach the disciples something. Is that faith doesn't have a schedule. You see, Peter needed Jesus to get over there so that they could be a blessing. But Jesus said, any time is a time to be a blessing. You see what I mean? Because all in faith doesn't have an occasion. All in faith always is a blessing. All in faith doesn't have an occasion. And so he's trying to teach that. But how many of us have a situational view of faith? That I only use my faith when I need to, when I'm desperate. I mean, I know people that have come to church because their world was rocked and their life was hitting rock bottom. And the moment everything got back to good and everything got patched, they're like, "Deuces, I'm out. See you later." And I'm just like, man, that's not faith. Faith is joining what God's not doing, not using him to get yourself better and then leaving it. Man, faith doesn't have an occasion. But that's what we do. It's the perfect example, guys. It's like this. You know, your house throughout the week. You could be honest. I'll be honest with you. Our house doesn't always stay clean. It doesn't. It happens sometimes where our house is a little dirty because life is busy, right? I'm working 2 jobs. My wife's working 2 jobs. We get busy. We got meetings going on. We got things happening sometimes. But we always have staff meeting on Tuesday. And this is so funny because the staff comes in and they see a house is pretty clean. Hey, it's nice and clean. But if they would go open our bedroom door, can I be a little honest in the house today? If they would go open my bedroom door, then might not be a little clean in there. It's like for the occasion, we get it all pretty, but we're not truly taking care of it because we're stuffing it in the back. Can I preach a little bit today? Man, that sometimes we use faith as an occasion. Instead of being all in and having a faith that's every day, we make it special for the days we need it to be there, while we just tuck everything else in the back, in the closet, in the bedroom. Man, we just don't want everybody else today because we have a situational view of faith. And it's faith like that, man. I don't want to have a faith like that, though. You know, it's like those china dishes that you never take out except for special occasions, right? And I don't want to have that kind of faith. I want to have a paper plate kind of faith. I want to have a faith that I can take out for everyday use. You know what I'm saying? I want to have an all-in kind of faith, an all-in kind of every moment kind of faith that I ain't worried about what's the occasion because I'm walking every day with the Lord. That I'm coming here on Sunday to worship and get empowered in my faith, but I pray that it revisits me on my Monday. I pray that on my Tuesday, it's back to remind me of my faith. I pray that on Wednesday, when things are getting a little rocky, I can look back at my notes and remember what God was speaking to me from that Sunday because I have an all-in kind of faith. Because I'm not all this about every day or about just one day a week or 2 days a week. Man, I want to live every day of the week because any time is a time to be a blessing for Jesus. Amen. Come on, you can give God a little shout in here. You can wake up a little bit. And faith, all in faith, doesn't have an occasion. Faith is not something we do. Faith is who we are. It's what we walk in. It's what we do, man, because that's what all in faith. So all in faith has an objective. All in faith doesn't have an occasion. And point number 3, what we see is, pull up verse 47 for me, Tori, as we see something happen in this story. We're going to see 2 outcomes. We're going to see an outcome play out, one outcome play out for the sick lady, and then we're going to see a perceived outcome from Jairus and some of the other guys, okay? Check this out. It says, verse 46, it says, but Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive the power's going out from me. And when the woman saw that she had not been hidden, she came trembling and falling down. And it says what? She's been immediately healed. All right, I wanted to make sure you guys are catching this. You're getting this because this is good stuff. This is going to set some people free. Look at the next verse. Man, this is where, so we have one person who's a sick lady. What was her outcome? She was healed. Right? She was healed. Next person, it says, and he said to her, daughter, your faith has been made you well. And then it says, while he was still speaking, while Jesus was still teaching, while he was doing something, behind his back, someone from the ruler's house said, dude, your daughter's dead, Jairus. Don't even bother to teach her anymore. She's dead. He saw this moment where he felt like his faith came to an end, where it was over with. And he said, don't even bother the teacher anymore. His faith was based on an outcome. His faith was based on an outcome, and it was starting to leave him. I think about it like this, you know. I'm a huge basketball fan, if you don't know, rocking LeBrons today. Because I love LeBron James, and I love the Cleveland Cavaliers. And last year, as they played in the NBA Finals, I knew the Warriors were going to win, but I had faith that the Cavaliers could pull it out, right? If you don't know basketball, it's okay. I'm going to explain to you what kind of happened, okay? Because, see, it's the first person to win 4 games. And the Cavaliers were about to win this game that would have tied up the series and would have gave us a shot to really win this. But this guy named Kevin Durant comes dribbling down the court. Durantula, 6'7", 8 guy, probably 7 foot, running down. He stops at the 3-point line, and in LeBron's face, he lets one fly at the end of the game, and he drills it and ices the game for the Warriors. And I saw that go through the net, and I was just like, no, we lost. Maybe I can relate to you New Orleans people a little bit more. You know how you felt in all that high faith when we were up against the Eagles with 24 seconds left, and then they throw one deep on us, and it's like, dude, what were you doing? Why'd you miss the guy? And then you see the receivers, not from the Eagles, from the Vikings running in the touchdown, and all your faith just goes away. Oh, man. I remember how I felt like that. But it's so crazy how so many of us don't have an all-in kind of faith. We have a faith that's based on an outcome. We have a faith that if it doesn't go the way that we expect it to go, man, we lose our faith so fast. Can I tell you that if your faith is dependent on an outcome, then it's only a matter of time before you lose it. If your faith is expected on what God will do for you, man, then only one day you'll lose it. That's what we see in this passage in verse 49. Verse 49, he says, your daughter's dead. Don't even bother with the teacher anymore. She's dead. He had lost faith. I can only imagine how Jairus felt in that moment. I mean, you're talking about your daughter who you loved and you're growing up with. In this moment, she's dead, and you're hearing the news for the first time. And you're probably thinking in your head, if Jesus would have just got there faster, and if he could have just answered a little quicker, if the sick lady would just not have grabbed his garment, he'd have got there on time, she'd have been healed, and it would have been all good. You see, there's this thing called expectancy. And there's this thing called faith. What are you living by? Are you living by expectation, or are you living by faith? I'm not talking about the expectant heart of, I'm expecting of God to do something today. Like when I came in here, like our volunteer team, we're in here praying at 9 o'clock, expecting that God's going to move. I'm not talking about that, though. I'm talking about the kind of expectation where you're like, I'm praying to God to give me that job promotion. Or I'm praying to God to give me that financial blessing. Or I'm praying to God for my kid to finally know Jesus that's been on drugs and all this kind of stuff. I'm praying to God for this. And the moment your expectation gets busted because it doesn't happen the way you want it to happen is the moment you lose your faith. I know how many people that lost a loved one and stopped believing in the Lord because they were mad at God, mad at him, mad for what he did. I know people that pulled away from God in those instances is because faith was based on an outcome. It was based on an expectation. But Jesus, man, he's trying to teach these guys something right here. Pull up verse 50. He's trying to teach them something. Because he goes in this moment and he says, Jesus, on hearing this, answered them. So he's heard that the girl died and that they've all lost their faith. And you know what's crazy? The first words he says is, do not fear. Actually, I didn't even prepare this. I think this is God just speaking to my heart. How many times do we lose our faith and think that God's judging us? How many of us lose our faith and think God's ready to knock us with a thunderbolt from Zeus? Wow. Because we lost our faith. And he just heard Jairus lose his faith because his daughter was dead. It seemed like the outcome was over. But the first 3 words he says is, do not fear. Do not fear. And he says, only believe and she will be well. It's crazy. And you're about to catch this, and this is about to bring some revelation to your lives right now. Jesus didn't have a faith that was based on an outcome. He had a faith that was based on an outlook. Can I get an amen on that? He didn't have a faith that was based on an outcome. He had a faith that's based on an outlook. And I want to have a different kind of faith. I don't want to have a kind of faith that's based on what might happen to me. I want to have a faith that will keep lasting, that will keep going, that will get me through every day, that will get me through every situation. Man, I want to have an outlook on faith, not an outcome-based kind of faith, because that kind of faith will keep me going. That kind of faith will keep me going through every season that I face. It's when I have that kind of faith, man, that I keep rolling, because it's not based on an outcome, it's based on an outlook. So I don't live by this. Jesus was teaching about this faith that was based on an outlook. And that's what we do sometimes, though. And we let outcome dictate the way our faith will go in our life instead of letting our faith dictate how we act in certain situations and what's going on. I just want to have a different kind of faith. And I want to have the faith that when I'm praying and I'm sick and I stay sick, I still have faith. When I'm praying that my kids will come to know Jesus and they still doing drugs, I still have faith. When I know that I want to see this financial provision come from God, I still keep praying, even though it ain't happened yet. When I know that I'm praying to get married somebody, amen, some of you single people ready to get married in the house and that woman ain't came yet, I'm still praying because she's going to come one day or he's going to come one day. Because I have an all-in kind of faith. I have the kind of faith that's going to keep going through Monday, that's going to keep going through Tuesday, because it doesn't have an occasion. It's not based on an expectation. It's based on faith, grounded in who Jesus is, because surely if he's called you to it, he's going to give you the grace to get through it because of the outlook that you have in your life. It's about having that kind of faith. That kind of faith. So all-in faith has an objective, a pure objective. All in faith doesn't have an occasion, and all in faith doesn't have an outcome. It has an outlook. And point number 4, man, this is what I saw God do something so cool. So I'm learning about all in faith. I'm learning that I need to join into what God's doing. I'm learning that I need to have a great outlook, that even if the prayer's not been answered yet, I'm going to keep going because I have faith, an all-in kind of faith. I'm praying about that. And I'm not just going to use my faith on Sunday, because if God gives me the opportunity to share my faith at work, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to share my faith. If he gives me the opportunity to talk to someone and share with them about what God can do in their life, I'm going to keep walking in faith. That's not going to be a situational kind of view of faith, not based on a situation. I'm going to give faith to God even when things are going good in my life. I'm going to give faith to God when things are going bad in my life. I'm going to give faith to God in all seasons. But point number 4 is all in faith has an order. It has an objective, doesn't have an occasion, doesn't have an outcome, it has an outlook. But all in faith has an order. You see, there's something that happens in this story. This sick lady, can we talk about the sick lady for a few minutes before we get out of here? This sick lady, she was considered unclean in this time because she had a blood discharge. So really what should be happening is she should be off somewhere. It's like back in this time, if you were diseased, you were casted out, like almost exiled on there. And people would be walking by yelling unclean at you. Could you imagine? I mean, this lady's had this disease her whole life. She had every reason to blame God and not want to have anything to do with God because of how she was growing up and how people were pointing at her and yelling unclean. But yet, she hears about this guy named Jesus. This guy that's walking around, feeding 5,000 people with a Lunchable, touching people's lives, raising people from the grave. He's doing all these cool things. And she sees this crowd following him. And so she's like, if I could just touch him, maybe something will happen in my life. But can I tell you that so many times we don't have the mindset if I can get there. So many times, man, we have the mindset that, God, if you want me to do this, then you gotta do this for me. Like, God, you want me to take this step of faith? Well, then you need to do this for me first. God, do this for me, and then I'll do this for you. We have this faith that's been out of order. Because the faith we kind of see in the Bible, the all-in faith we see in the Bible, had nothing to do with saying, God, do this for me, and then I will do for you. It had everything to know that their power was in the name of Jesus. And if I could just get over there, and if I could just reach out to who he is, even if I got to go through a crowd of people, and even though I'm supposed to be over here where people can shout unclean, where I might even get in trouble for being right here, I know that I've got to reach out because it's him that's going to save me. It's him that's going to bring me freedom. It's him who's going to bury my shame. It's him who's going to do this for me. And I just got to reach out. Even in the story in Mark chapter 3, can we pull up verses, I think, 4 again? Mark chapter 3, verse 4. And he said to man with a withered man, come here. Oh, go to the next verse, actually. They were silent. The next verse. It says, and he looked around at them with anger, and he said to this man with this withered hand, right? He said, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and then he was restored. Reach comes before restoration. Reach comes before restoration. Some of you in here have had a faith where you want God to do for you, and God's saying, I'll do for you, but you need to stretch out your hand first. And you see, it's crazy because the way I think about it, it's not just in salvation terms. If you don't know the Lord, the first step you got to take is you got to reach out to Him. But the part that I keep thinking about that keeps coming back to me is like we're struggling with sin so bad in our life. We have something that's tucked away that maybe many people don't know about. We're struggling with it so bad, man. But when we come to church, we're like, what's up? Gonna get my praise on today with Jesus. You good? Yeah, I'm good. What's up? And if we always came to church and hid the parts that needed to be touched, that's not all in faith. You see, if I want God to move in my life, then I got to come to church with the vulnerable parts. I got to come to parts with the parts where I need help with, and I got to stretch out my hand and say, God, this is taking my life over. Man, I have so much depression and fear and anxiety in my life right now that I don't even know what to do. I can't tuck it behind me and fake a smile when I see people, because guess what? When you go back to Monday, it's going to be there again. And you keep saying, God, I just need you to take this depression away from me. I need you to just take this anxiety away from me. And God's saying, I'll take it, but you just need to reach out. You're like, well, I am reaching out. I'm asking you to do this. God maybe is saying, well, stop going to church every Easter and Christmas, and then maybe you start finding faith each and every day. Start letting God move in your life in certain days of the week. Because all in faith has an order. It's reach before restoration. And I don't know what you came in here with today. Whether you're battling with something in your life, it's going to take reach before the healing comes. And reaching is all in faith. All in faith says, I'm going to reach for God. And when I grab a hold to Him, just like Joshua was wrestling with God that one time, or was it Jacob? Jacob, my bad. Jacob was wrestling with God, and he grabbed onto Him, and he wouldn't let go. I'm not letting go of you this time, God. Some of you need to reach out and hold on like you've never held on before. Stop letting situations dictate how you have faith. Stop letting outcomes dictate how you have faith. Let your faith be an everyday kind of faith. Let your faith be a different kind of faith. Let your faith be something that'll get you through every day, through every situation. A faith that'll reach out. A faith that doesn't have a schedule. A faith that doesn't have a situation. It's a faith that I'm going to keep moving forward in because I believe in His power and I believe in what He's going to do it. And I'm going to give Him all the glory because He's with me every day. All in faith. I want to move into next week, into last words with an all-in kind of faith. I want to move in next week with an all-in kind of faith and see God do something I've never seen before. 3 months ago, we could barely fill half of this room up. 3 months ago, God's starting to send people over here, new people that are starting to see God move. We're going to give Him the glory because He deserves it, and because this church is going to have an all-in kind of faith that's going to make an impact in this community.